I didn't even realize what had happened until the sound of it scraped into my skull like metal tearing through bone. The first step I took inside the ruined corridor of the factory, the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, and I saw it. A shape, a thing. It wasn't supposed to move, but it did. A heap of twisted, rust-covered machinery suddenly shuddered, and from beneath its weight something human, or once human, was being dragged across the cracked concrete floor. Its arms flailed weakly, its mouth opened in a silent scream, and its eyes, white, hollow, and wet with terror, snapped toward me, fixing on me with unnatural clarity. I froze, breath caught in my chest. Then, as if the shadows themselves swallowed it whole, both the creature and the body vanished, leaving only a smear of oil that gleamed in my flashlight's trembling beam.
You might think I'd have turned back right then. Most people would have. But I'm not most people. For years I'd been drawn to places like this. Abandoned mills, collapsed warehouses, decaying Soviet-era power plants left to rot. I had explored dozens, maybe hundreds, searching for forgotten stories, half believing in the whispers of strange experiments and unspeakable secrets. Nothing had ever stopped me. Fear is a familiar feeling, but not one that holds me. If anything, it's part of the addiction. And so, instead of retreating into the forest like any sane man, I steadied my breath and pressed deeper into the belly of the factory.
I'd learned of this place only a few weeks before, in the strangest way. At a flea market in a nearby town, buried beneath stacks of damp books and old Soviet manuals, I'd found a worn leather notebook. Most of its pages were useless, filled with accounting records and production schedules. But toward the back, scribbled in shaky handwriting, was something different. It spoke of a factory hidden deep in the woods, erased from maps after the late 1970s, where Project K had taken place. Human-machine integration, it hinted, sacrifices to industry. A few scattered rumors had survived among locals who refused to approach the forest even decades later. They said people went in and never returned. They said the walls whispered your name.
I didn't believe in curses, but I believed in places carrying weight. Memories too heavy to die. This factory had that kind of gravity, and now I was inside it. The smell hit me next. Thick, metallic, almost sweet, like copper left in the rain too long. My boots crunched over shards of broken glass and twisted bolts scattered across the floor. Rusted machines loomed out of the darkness, presses, lathes, conveyor belts, each frozen in mid-motion, as if workers had vanished in the middle of their shift. Dust covered everything, yet there was a sense of recent disturbance. My flashlight caught faint smears along the floor, black and glistening, trails leading into deeper corridors. The silence was not complete. It carried with it a faint, low vibration, something at the edge of hearing, like a hum, like a breath. I told myself it was the wind slipping through the broken windows, but the rhythm was too steady, too alive. It was as if the building itself had lungs. I pushed deeper. The hall opened into a vast production floor.
the ceiling vanishing into darkness high above. Steel beams stretched like skeletal ribs overhead. My light swept across conveyor belts lined with machinery, some cracked and broken, others strangely intact, their gears still faintly quivering as though resisting death. I paused, leaning closer to one of the machines. Its belt twitched once, twice, without power. I stepped back quickly, bile rising in my throat.
And then I saw them. Bodies. Not fresh, but not bones either. They were trapped in grotesque positions across the machines, as if fused into them. A man's face pressed flat against a pane of glass, the skin melted into it like wax. Fingers sticking out of conveyor belts as if reaching for freedom. A torso jammed between gears, ribs cracked open but preserved, frozen in place by decades of rust. Their eyes, those that still had eyes, were open, glassy, staring into nothing. I stood there too long, staring, forgetting to breathe. The silence pressed in tighter, and with it came a sound, not a whisper, a voice.
It was low at first, vibrating in my chest more than in my ears. A syllable repeated, a tone that seemed to curl around my name. Then it split, fracturing into dozens of voices, male and female, old and young, all murmuring at once. They overlapped, discordant, but together they formed something worse than words, a plea, a demand. Stay. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound was inside me, not outside. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I stumbled backward, colliding with a rusted pipe. My flashlight slipped, rolling across the floor, its beam swinging wildly across the hall. For a split second, it caught movement. Not machinery, not rats, but a figure. Human shape, but wrong. Too thin, too elongated, its joints bending at impossible angles as it crawled across the ceiling, watching me with sockets that glowed faintly red. Then the light spun away, plunging the corner into blackness again. I retrieved the flashlight with shaking hands, forcing myself to breathe, to focus. Fear would get me killed. Logic, routine, observation. That was how I survived places like this. But the factory was not like any place I had been before. It was not content to be explored. It pressed in on me, rearranging its corridors when I turned corners, making rooms stretch longer than they should. I knew I was being disoriented deliberately, as if the building itself were toying with me. I found a staircase and climbed, the steps groaning beneath my weight. The walls were slick with a dark substance, sticky and warm against my fingers. The second floor was worse than the first. Hallways narrowed until I could barely squeeze through, lined with wires that seemed to pulse faintly, as if carrying blood instead of electricity. My light caught glimpses of faces in the walls, warped impressions as though people had been swallowed whole. Their eyes followed me as I passed. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to tell myself it was hallucination, fatigue, the power of suggestion. But then I entered what must once have been a control room. The floor was littered with paper, soaked
cracked and rotting, but still legible. Diagrams of machines spliced with human anatomy. Notes written in Russian, half erased but still decipherable. Subject integration. Resistance minimal. Machine accepts. My stomach twisted. On the far wall, a massive panel of shattered glass looked down onto the production floor below. And in the corner, something stirred.
At first, I thought it was a man slumped against the wall. But when I stepped closer, it twitched violently. Its face turned toward me, splitting into a smile too wide for any human mouth. The skin of its cheeks tore as it stretched, revealing teeth blackened and jagged. Its eyes weren't eyes, just pits of void, endless and consuming. My name spilled from its mouth in a chorus of voices, overlapping, too loud, too close. I staggered backward, stumbling over rusted pipes, my flashlight shaking so hard the beam fractured across the walls. And then I ran. The factory didn't chase me. It didn't need to. The corridors shifted, doors slammed shut where they hadn't been, staircases bent impossibly. Every shadow moved, stretching like hands reaching out. My breaths came ragged, every muscle in my body screaming for me to get out. I don't know how long I ran or which turns I took, but at last I found a stairwell leading down, then a side door half buried in rubble. I threw myself through it, scraping my shoulders raw, and collapsed into the forest night. The silence of the trees felt unreal, too calm after the storm inside. My legs trembled as I stood, forcing myself to look back. The factory was there, as it had always been, silent, still, a hulking silhouette against the moonlit sky. Nothing moved. But on the roof, just barely visible, was a figure, thin, angular, perfectly still, staring directly at me. My skin prickled, my breath caught. It didn't move closer. It didn't leave the factory grounds. It only watched. I turned and fled, refusing to look back again. Weeks later, I found myself in a small crop duster plane, flying low over fields of corn. The horizon stretched endlessly, broken only by the dark green patch of forest I knew too well. My chest tightened as we passed over it, and there it was. From above, the factory stood exactly as I remembered it, gray and decayed, untouched by time. And on the roof, in the same place as before, the figure stood, still, watching. Even from that height, even through the rattling glass of the plane, its gaze locked onto mine, unbroken, unblinking. I turned away, but the image burned into my mind. The factory never followed me. It didn't need to. It waits, patient and eternal, its horrors locked within its walls. But I know it remembers me. And I know that when I close my eyes at night, the whispers I hear are not dreams. They are reminders. That factory is still there, and something inside it is still watching.